Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. Thank you again for tuning in, and hello to FTB Nation. I think we're kind of back to normal now, and I could officially say the pandemic is over. Jamie, I think you're back to the office, right?
Yeah, so I've been back to the office for a few weeks, and I actually just got back from a meeting with a customer at a breakfast place. So that was nice to actually finally meet somebody out and, have the availability to order food and sit down and talk in the restaurant. So I was, it was very nice to get back to that.
That's awesome. No, I'm still at home. I think the office is going to open in a few more weeks, but whatever, it's all good. So on today's episode, we have the chance to interview Yogashri Pradhan. She's a reservoir engineer for Endeavour Energy Resources in the Permian. She is involved with field development planning for unconventionals in the Midland Basin. She's also worked as a senior production engineer for Texas Oil and Gas, as well as Devon Energy. She's overseen various production optimization studies and field operations. She's an active SPA member and a chairman for the Permian Basin section. This girl, let me tell you, is a boss, and I cannot wait to hear her story. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for embarrassing me, guys.
Well, no, come on. You are a boss. We got to tell the world.
Well, I appreciate it, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing as far as setting a platform for people in oil and gas to talk about their stories on different subjects. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the first time we talked, it was really great to hear your story and how you started. And I'd really like to get into that for our listeners. So can you tell us about growing up and then also touch on some of the things you talked about with Macy and I about how your parents picked out those certain attributes in you when at a young age?
I moved around a lot growing up, but I've mostly grown up in Houston. At a very young age, my mom knew that I was good at math and science. I picked up skills in math very quickly. So she would get me toys that would enhance my skills in math and science or make me think like an engineer. And I just happened to like it too. So my mother and my dad would try to enrich me that way by making me solve a lot of math problems, enroll me in science and math competitions. And once they saw that those skill sets grow, I just kept going. But I was very fortunate to have my mom and dad to point those skills out in me just based on my natural inclination. And they were able to provide me that direction at a young age to become an engineer.
Wow. I know you mentioned that you went to an all engineering girls camp in high school, which I was blown away when you mentioned it because it's not very common. I hadn't even really heard of that growing up. So I think it's really cool that your parents put you in that. Was it through your parents or was it you in high school, you were, old enough to say hey, this is my passion. I kind of want to go into an engineering camp, or was it your parents pushing that on? And what were the pros and cons? Because I'm assuming high school is a really difficult, period in our lives. How did you feel about going to an engineering camp? Was it cool back then?
Well, I was trying to figure out what to do over the summer. And what I would do over the summer is prepare for the next grade. And that's just what I did. That wasn't forced upon by my parents or anything. In fact, they wanted me to get out a little bit more, or they would try to make me a little bit more well-rounded. But I was trying to figure out things to do over the summer. I was reading a catalog from U of H because living in Houston, we get some of those catalogs. Mm-hmm. And I think there was an ad or there was a course registration for grade camp. So that's the camp that U of H would hold for all girls for 1 week. My mom and I were talking about it and we both thought it was a good idea. That intrigued me because while I was more inclined on the engineering route, I was a little bit hesitant. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of engineer I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. So there's so many, yeah.
So as far as that pro and con go, that would be the con. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in engineering, but I knew I wanted to be some type of engineer. When I joined the camp, mostly focused on electrical engineering and robotics as far as math and science concepts go. But the biggest objective of that camp was to show that women can be engineers. You can there are different activities that you can even do in your high school, such as joining robotics or joining Science Olympiad, for example, or joining Mu Alpha Theta. It's the math club, and you compete in math and science competitions. So they would provide those opportunities for you, or I mentioned those resources. The turning point for me, or how I learned about petroleum engineering, is near the end of the camp, we'd have a session of professionals from throughout the Houston area, different engineering backgrounds, and they came and sat with us and talked about their experiences and how rewarding an engineer career is. That's when I first heard about oil and gas. So that's a little bit of a glimpse of grade camp.
Wow.
So when you finished high school, did you end up applying for a job? Shit, can we restart that? So after high school, did you apply to go to a university for petroleum engineering, or what kind of engineering did you like based on the camp and everything that you attended?
So after the camp, I heard a little bit about petroleum, but I didn't revisit it until my junior or senior year of high school. And throughout high school, I didn't hear much about petroleum engineering. It didn't come into my mind as far as a degree plan I wanted to apply for in college. When I started thinking about petroleum engineering again, it was an opportunity that came from our school district. There was a gifted and talented mentorship program, and they would select, and it's not a gifted and talented program where you take AP classes or you take honors classes in high school. It's a dedicated program where select high school students are working on their career development. Their first semester, depending on the industry they want to pursue, they write a research paper. And then the second semester, they look for work, or they follow a mentor along the industry that they wanted to be a part of. That's when I remembered petroleum engineering again. I was also on the debate team in high school, so I learned a lot about current events in oil and gas. So that's what made me like oil and gas. But I thought the engineering that's only out there for me to get into oil and gas is chemical engineering. When I got selected for the program, I started doing research in petroleum engineering. And that's when I learned that there are petroleum engineering programs in Texas or throughout the United States. And when I was doing my research, I really was not sure what to write about. I ended up going to one of the U of H libraries, and that's how I learned about 1-Petro too. I just started researching on 1-Petro, and I came across CO2 flooding that sounded good to me, and I started writing a paper about CO2 flooding, using some of the guidance that we had on how to write a research paper as a senior in high school. Then, as I mentioned about the finding work for the spring semester, one of our requirements was we send cold emails, learn how to write an email to professionals. I started sending cold emails to people that I found online of consulting firms and oil and gas companies, and I only got one response. That response ended up being my first mentor. He worked for an oil and gas consulting firm. He saw my research paper or my attempt to talk about CO2 flooding. He saw something in me, and then he invited me to come speak with him. And that's how he offered me not just a mentorship or an internship in the spring, but we extended that to the summer before I attended university. So I learned about petroleum engineering from the grade camp, being on the debate team, and revisiting or rekindling my interest in petroleum engineering from that mentorship program. And then mentorship just really solidified for me that I wanted to apply at UT for petroleum.
Wow. I mean, I'm smiling and laughing as you're saying all these things. So I'm like, what the heck was I doing in high school? Like, I want to go back and slap myself and be like, get your things together, you know? But that's like, it's incredible to even hear that. You're obviously a very smart cookie. So you went to petroleum engineering school, you graduated, and you started working at Devon, right? So I know until that point and a little bit of your internships, you had maybe like a theory of what oil and gas would look like. You know, what was it like when you actually went to location and like lived oil field? You know, what was that like?
That's a good question. Before I went to the location, I I went to networking events. I was trying to get involved with SPE and with the help of my mentor. And the unanimous answer I would get from everybody that I talked to when they learned about what stage I was as far as about to go to university, make sure one of your first internships is a field internship. Make sure you get field exposure. Make sure you learn and you know about the field. So that was my priority. One of my first internships for university, I wasn't going to accept an internship unless it was a field internship. I had an office internship as a freshman, but after that, I wanted to have a field internship. So going on location, I knew that I didn't know anything, but I was very excited, to say the least. I wasn't intimidated by it at all. I think one of the good things that these internship programs do, especially at Devon, is the emphasis on safety. And another piece of advice I got from people that I networked with before I went to university is people on location don't necessarily have the degree or necessarily have the paper, but that doesn't mean that you know more than them. They're the ones that have worked on location for so many years. So make sure you asked a lot of questions. So when I went on location, not only was I a little bit clueless and excited, but I was asking questions to the point where I was saying, "What's that?" almost all the time. I was just pointing at equipment and said, "What's that?" And I didn't feel embarrassed about it because there was a lot of reinforcement before I went to location saying that that's okay.
I feel like too, when you get to location, everybody's really open to helping you out. Like, yes. I don't think anybody ever looks down on anyone if they question anything, or even people use a lot of acronyms in oil and gas, and sometimes it can get very confusing when they're using them and you're not used to them. So even asking for clarification, I felt like people really never, look down upon you.
People are very appreciative when you come on location, because when I used to talk to people in the field, they would say, well, your next assignment's going to be in the office and you're going to spend the majority of your career in the office. So it's a breath of fresh air when engineers come on location, and they do feel appreciated when you want to come and when you ask them questions and when you genuinely want to know what they're doing. I think people have a sense of appreciation, and they do respect you a lot more when you go on location too. And about the acronyms, I also asked a lot of what's that too.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned being a part of SPE, and, you are clearly an avid writer. You've been writing papers since high school and winning awards for them. From the research that I've seen, you've written close to 12 papers for SPE, and you also won the International Student Paper Contest. Can you describe what process you use to write? I know this has got to be time consuming because you have a full-time job too. So how do you manage that?
There's a funny story to that. When I competed for the student paper contest, the easiest topic you can choose is based on your internship. Judges are really receptive to case studies or actual work that you've done to add value for the company. And what I learned from the internship, I didn't even know that I was going to be required to write a paper. When I advanced to the international level, I got a notification I got questions from other people that were in different divisions. They were asking me, "Oh, did you finish your paper yet?" "What paper?" That's when I read the email closely saying, "Oh, I have to write a paper for my contest." Well, I used the same tactics that I did in tackling my internship. And even though it's an industry study, you somewhat use the scientific method where it starts with a question. But in the case of an internship, it's a business question. What business question do you have? What hypothesis do you think that you have? How do you create the experiment? Or what research do you have to do before you design your experiment? And in the case of my internship project, the experiment would be, you're running decline curves, you're trying to find a statistical distribution. And I can send you the link of the paper too. And then, is your hypothesis correct? If it's not, then you go back and try to fix your workflow. So I used the tactics that I used in tackling my internship, and that's how I wrote the story. To refine it a little bit more, there's some resources that I can give. SP has a lot of good guidance on how to write a technical paper, so I checked that out. In university, we would have a class that's dedicated to technical writing, and they talked a lot about the SP style guide. So I used SP's resources. I used the mindset that I had in tackling my internship project at Devon. And of course, when it wasn't an official peer review, but have as many people as possible read your work, because the more feedback you get, the better you get.
I didn't even realize they had those resources out there. I'm really glad that you shared that.
Sure. And I can send that to you too after
yeah, we'll link it down below on the podcast notes. So you worked at Devon, and then give us a little bit of that transition between Endeavour to Endeavour Energy Resources, and what happened? Why did you make that switch?
So Endeavour is my third job. So before transitioning out of Devon, I had another job. I worked as a field engineer for Devon in Midland. So I worked for the central basin platform, a little bit in the Midland Basin. And I worked as a field engineer, where I'd be a worksite supervisor for workovers, a little bit of frac, and I pumped for a little bit. And then Devon closed their office in 2016. Given the commodity prices, their activity also scaled down to look for other opportunities. And growing up in Houston, I moved immediately back to Houston. And knowing that the scaling down was going to happen, I reached out to as many people as possible. And the same day that I learned that the Devon office was closing, I got an email back from one of my university professors about this opportunity at a company called Texas Oil and Gas Institute. And I thought that was an internship opportunity, because the recruiter, or I guess the CEO of Texas Oil and Gas Institute, did an info session at UT only looking for interns. So I had the mindset saying, well, as long as I get experience, I don't care if it's paid or not. I'm living with my parents now.
Yeah.
When I walked into the interview, at the end of the interview, that's when I started thinking, thank you for this internship offer. I thanked my interviewer, or his name is Jeff Spath. He was the 2014 SP president. I thanked him for having this internship opportunity open. And then he looked at me, gave me a weird look, and he said, this is a full-time opportunity for production.
Wow.
And it was a happy surprise, but we had a really good conversation from that interview. And within a week, I got the job for Togi. So I worked for Togi for 2 years. This time it's in the office. I did a lot of look-back studies in production engineering, artificial lift, and it was on a large acreage of land for supporting university land. So it was still related to Permian Basin, but this time it was Midland and Delaware Basins.
Can you explain the association between university lands and UT, because University of Texas? Because I don't think people realize that UT owns and produces like on oil fields. So
Right. So University Lands is an organization that oversees about 2.1 million acres, and in all the revenue that comes from that acreage in the Midland and Delaware Basins, they contribute to funding the University of Texas built for infrastructure. The acreage is leased out to over 280 operators, and the operators' production royalties are where UT Systems Schools gets their money. But if you look at the distribution from university lands, the majority of that money actually goes to University of Texas schools, particularly the flagship schools, and then the third of that goes to A&M.
Wow. Yes, so everybody who lives in Austin, I would like you to know that your University of Texas school is funded by oil and gas.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
That's what I tell all my friends who question my career choices.
Yes.
So what exactly happened after you took that job and then made your transition to Endeavour?
When I took the job with Togi, I mentioned I worked there for a couple of years. When the commodity prices went back up a little bit in 2018, I wanted to take advantage of working for an operator, and I wanted to go back to Midland because that's where all the activity is. And I would have people at the office joke with me, I think you're going to go to Midland now. But and even though that was meant to be like trying to get under my skin, I really didn't mind it because I lived here before, and I know what I'm getting myself into, and it's really not bad. But anyway, I started applying for different opportunities. But if I want to backtrack a little bit about Endeavour. and I didn't know how this was going to happen. I volunteered to be a part of the ERTech technical sessions. Like I would be a session chair, and I was also presenting a paper at the ERTech conference in 2017. I took advantage of a morning talk that was sold out, but I wanted to show up to see if there were any extra spots as a standby. There were extra spots in the room, and my luck was great. And then there was an open table with me, and when at the time I didn't know that was going to be my future boss at Endeavour, randomly sat next to him. And I don't know why I wanted to sit on a morning talk on petrophysics, but I did because I was very curious. And I started talking to him. I was introducing myself, doing the standard networking, and I learned, I saw the business card and it said Endeavour. And I didn't hear about Endeavour for about 7 years at the time. I learned that was a vertical well company. But started speaking with him, talked to him about university lands, told him about my paper, and then we exchanged business cards. And I didn't think about the exchange back then. But when I was looking for opportunities, sifting through my business cards, and I emailed him. And he emailed me back. This email happened 6 months later. And that's when he said, oh, there's a reservoir engineer position that's available. If you're interested, we can set up an interview, set up a conversation. So after a couple rounds of interviews in Houston and then in the office, I was privileged to get the opportunity to work as a reservoir engineer. But the biggest lesson I learned from all of that was you really never know who you're going to meet in this industry. And despite having an opportunity at hand, it never hurts to network. And I've known that. Having a network is keeping a pulse.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very important. I do feel like, especially when you've worked for a very long time and you never have to find a job, people really do I've gotten the sense that people have underestimated networking at least. But,
yeah, in sales, networking is your lifeline for sure. So it's nice to have you say that from an engineering operator standpoint. And it's really nice to have connections because you never know what might happen in the industry. So you always want to, leave one door open. You don't ever want to close it on anybody, especially when you meet somebody at an event like that. It really paid off for you, definitely.
I know you mentioned last time that you are associated with Women in Energy Network groups, and you love to learn more and research on diversity and inclusion. Can you give us a few things? I know you sent us a few links. Can you talk to us a little bit about stats on, diversity and inclusion and women in oil and gas?
Sure. I chair Women in Energy for SPE for this year, so SPE International. It's a global organization where we try to promote or get more women recognized within the industry or hold events that promote more women in the industry. As far as stats go, I'll start with SPE, where we had a Women in Energy event, our flagship event during our annual conference back in September and October of last year. And our current SP president, her name is Shauna Noonan, she mentioned how 17% of SP members are female. And I was reading something this morning from the Houston Chronicle from the Department of Labor that 22% of the entire workforce for the oil and gas industry are women. And this Houston Chronicle article was also talking about how I guess minority demographics are advocating for more diversity in oil and gas. And they made a call to how we need to shape our perspective whenever we're recruiting. And because unconscious bias can even happen at the recruiting standpoint. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a lot that I can talk about here, but I was also sitting on I was attending a diversity and inclusion panel that A&M just promoted. And they were talking about how different demographics have different obstacles. And they broke it down. So there are some demographics where recruiting is an issue. For other demographics, it would be career advancement is an issue. The recruitment is not a problem. So Asian Americans, for example, the recruitment is not a problem. It's career advancement that can be an issue. For other demographics such as African Americans or Hispanics or Latinos, those who identify as that, it's recruitment that's an issue. So it's for those programs, it's really imperative introducing to STEM subjects at a very young age is very important. And then career mentors and sponsors are very important, but that's important for everyone. But those are just a couple of statistics. Oh, and for the awards, for SP awards, when we talk about promoting women in SP awards, there was just a recent overview that we looked at that 12% of women get awarded professional and technical awards in SPE. And if you just narrow it down to the technical awards, at the numbers in the single digits, I think it's 5% or less. So,
yeah, those stats are very interesting. And how you break it down in demographic too is very interesting. What could you say you yourself could do today as, a chairman of the SPE and Permian, and the involvement that you have to push change within the industry based on the stats that, you do have today?
Well, I'll start with what we do in Women in Energy, and then I'll talk about some of the things we're doing in the Permian Basin. For Women in Energy, we've had these 5 pillars as far as how to promote diversity and inclusion. I mean, not just for women, but for all groups. One would be so we have a leadership subcommittee where promoting more women to get them recognized for SP awards, or having them become as speakers or moderators for SP events. There is partnership and outreach. So we collaborate with other organizations like Society of Women Engineers, American Association of Petroleum Geologists, or AAPG, or, well, there are other professional organizations. We try to hold panels. Oh, Women in Hydraulic Fracturing is one of them. So that's partnership and outreach. There's also sections and chapters in STEM. There are student chapters and professional sections. We try to promote opening those Women in Energy committees within their own student chapter or professional section. And if they need any guidance on what kind of event they'd like to have, which is a networking event or a panel, and we provide them that guidance, or they let us know that these are the events that are happening, and we showcase that on our social media. And I think those are the main things that I wanted to talk about as far as our pillars go.
Thank you for sharing that.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Then we have we have our flagship event at ATCE, where that's what we continue quite a bit. We recruit women that have progressed quite a bit in the industry or advocates for diversity and inclusion, and we dedicate certain sessions, or we have a breakfast panel on our flagship event. That's where we get the most global audience. That's helped us as far as spreading awareness, or what the mission is, as well as trying to get others to become advocates as well. It's not just women. Mm-hmm. What we're doing in the Permian Basin, we're trying to start a Women in Energy committee and collaborate with other sections that have established Women in Energy committees as well. There are Women in Energy networks in the Permian Basin. So Women's Energy Network is an example, and we've reached out to them. They've done a really good job as far as holding monthly events and encouraging more women to take leadership opportunities and share their experiences. So those are things that I have been a part of. And then I've also mentioned to you guys this before, that I do make it an effort to lead by example. I'm very focused on the technical side, and any opportunity that I know that I can make the time for, such as running a conference or a symposium, or taking on the SPE for the section, I make sure, or I wouldn't say that I try to prove, but I would like to lead by example that not only this is possible, but there are certain things that I have applied by learning from others in the industry. It doesn't have to be from minorities that you can be successful. There's
I totally agree.
Thank you.
I
There's
agree with leading by example, especially as three women in oil and gas, or really all the women who are there. It is I feel like it is our job to show up and promote and, do everything, like be part of networks and talk about it. And because we are inspiring someone somewhere, that are looking up to us and saying like, oh, wow, she can do it. Maybe I can too, So,
and there are a lot of platforms to that talk, and it's not a bad thing. It's good to have a platform, but I think the one thing to keep in mind is that it's a start. I mean, action, there's a lot to do in order to have the action, in order to make your case. So I wanted to devote a lot more of my energy on the action and the leading by example part.
Man, you are, like I said, everybody who's been listening, she's a boss. You are a wealth of knowledge. We love having met you the first time on Zoom and like talk to you and just even get to know you. We're both blown away by your story. And even now, just learning even more. And you're such a great resource, and you're definitely a leader in the industry. So thank you for everything that you do. And before we leave off, where can everybody find you? I'm sure there's people who want to talk about SP, or how they can be part of maybe the Permian Basin chapter, etc. So if you want to just let everybody know where they can find you, and thank you so much again.
Well, thank you for having me. As far as how people can reach me, LinkedIn is the best platform, and Instagram is also the best platform too, and you can also find me on Facebook. My first choice would be connect with me on LinkedIn first before any of those other platforms.
Perfect. And then as far as the SPE events, is there a place where they can go and find that as well?
Well, we have a LinkedIn group for the SP Permian Basin section. I mean, if you just search SP Permian Basin section, you can do the same thing on Facebook. You'll find the group too. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, more than happy to give you more resources for that. But your best bet will be the LinkedIn, the Facebook page, and then if you Google search SPE Connect Permian Basin, you'll find our website there, and we try to update with events as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much, and everybody, thank you again for listening in to another amazing episode. Please, if you haven't yet, stop whatever you're doing after this and go leave us a review, and obviously it's got to be a 5-star. So thank you again, and we'll be in touch.